got the chair straight. Okay, so just rubbing your hands together. And then tapping over your face. Up over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. The other side. The upper part of your chest. And your belly. And finally, your legs. So with just that sort of beginning of the focus of attention into your body, feet extended, angling back in the chair, and just feeling your weight really sort of dropping back. Just notice how that feels. We spend a lot of time doing the opposite, sort of trying to hold ourselves up. So it's quite difficult to just sort of flop it, as it were, to the chair. This is what we're looking to be able to do in this day, is to soften the body, to stop fighting against the pull of gravity through our body. Just let your thoughts quieten and settle. Notice your breathing, the rhythm of your breath, the movements that come with the breathing. Whatever else there is to just gently hang your attention on in terms of your posture, what's going on within your body. Now, when you bring your feet in, get them in position, angle forward slightly, so you've got a little bit of weight in your feet. I'm slightly forwards in the chair, but I may well move back at some point if I feel that my back's beginning to stiffen up. So find a good position. Don't consider yourself stuck in this position. And remember again this feeling of sort of sinking downwards. We're not so much flopping downwards, we're not just collapsing. What we're doing is trying to let what we might think of as the outer edge of the body. I suppose it's one way to think of it. The skin, the big muscles of your back, and so on and so forth. Just softening a little bit, making a bit of space in your body, allowing your center of gravity to drop, but also revealing, as it were, this stronger quality within the body. And this is something that is very important to notice, because if all we do is try and sort of relax and soften and let go and all of those kind of phrases, then there's always a question, I think, often unconscious, of what happens when I collapse? Because we often assume that we need the tightness, the stiffness, simply to remain upright or to remain in shape. In fact, we don't, because releasing that allows you to feel what's coming up from inside. I suppose it's a bit like if you're growing a plant and you put a stick in beside it and you tie it to the stick to support it. At some time you'll want to take the stick away and give the plant a chance to find its own kind of root and its own strength. So there is this inner strength that begins to come through. And in a way, we can kind of locate it in the middle of the upper body, in the legs. And when we can locate it, we can begin to just move from there. So have this idea, that's all you need is the idea, that you're going to sort of initiate, say, so when we do this first movement, turn in your head, just try and get the sense that it's coming from deeper in the spine rather than just these muscles either side of your head. And then your shoulders, and here, as I've noted a number of occasions, trying to feel not just your shoulders, but ribs, muscles of your chest and upper back. So again, looking for what we might think of as a deeper source for the movements. Change in direction. Hands down to your sides and out to the top. Winding around. Another thing that attempt to sort of move from deeper within the body, to initiate the movement from deeper within the body, will help with is the sense of connection. Because the deeper in we go, the more we find what sometimes feels like it's a kind of single source. It probably isn't, but it can feel like that sometimes. That there are relatively few movements that we make as part of that core movement. And then winding around. So again, to use a sort of garden analogy, if you were to look beneath the surface of a flower garden, what you see beneath the surface would be mostly very similar. Some kind of root system going downwards, some kind of stem, so on, going upwards. Back the other way. But of course, above the ground, there's a huge variety that we might find in terms of colour and size, shape and scent. And it's a bit like that in Tai Chi. There's only a relatively small number of very basic movements that, as we come out to the edges of the body, in particular the hands, take on a wider and wider variety. And just rest your hands. Easing forwards and pushing back. So this is one of the really fundamental movements. Using my feet and legs and hips to move the weight from hips to feet and back. And that movement, moving the upper body forwards. Turn towards one leg, so it feels as though you're trying to touch your knee with your nose. You won't get that far, I don't suppose. I know I can't. In the other direction. And then when returning from your hips, your pelvis, drawing your head around in a circle. So many of the movements, if not all the movements, are focused here in the middle of the body. So these are some of the most basic movements of all. Go back the other way. Good. So maybe settle back into your hips, raise one heel, step forwards. And then on the other side. Good. So, hands down to your sides and just rotate so your palms are forward. And then again, this movement winding around, this time along with the movement of your weight. You see, we don't actually have to do that much with the arms, just a rotation. We don't have to do anything with the hands, really. If we've got the movement of the weight and these movements of the opening and closing in chest and upper back, more than enough there to make the pattern. One more time. Change into fisherman castanet. I suppose the key difference here is that we're not rotating the arms. That allows the arms and hands to swing a little bit more from our shoulders. Build a little bit of momentum in the course of doing that. And then when we change to rolling the ball in fact, in a way, we do even less. We simply leave our hands in this position. And then when they get to about here, let the elbows drop. So one thing about this is that actually there's a real emphasis here in your hips and your center of gravity sinking. That as always remains perhaps the fundamental action. And we can see here that it really does move your arms here. Your arms are doing quite a lot without having to do very much at all in that raising move. And then change into pigeon spreads its wings. Remember that the softer, the quieter, the sort of less busy we are in our shoulders and our arms, the smoother the movement, the greater the sense of flow. If we were standing, you would notice a difference in your stability as well. I think a common cause of losing balance is simply working too much, doing too much in the upper part of our body without giving a chance for the lower part of the body to, as it were, catch up. But if you ride a bike and lean out too far, you fall off the bike. And then pushing away. Now, go back to pigeon spreads its wings. The little sequence of 3. As you can see, we've got 3 movements here, the expression of which is quite different. Going now into the double punch. And yet, a lot of the movement, the forward and backward movement in our hips and our feet, the angling of the spine, the opening and closing of chest and upper back, are all pretty much the same. So our intent focuses the movement. We have an intention to do a particular movement. And as we become more familiar with the movements, obviously that process becomes more immediate, more accessible. One more round of this. and then changing. In a moment, we'll be changing from this to the vertical movements, and the principal change, I think, to take into account is that rather than alternating between feet and hips with a sense of, the weight sinking and pushing back up, it's actually done simultaneously in both feet and hips, or as near to simultaneous as possible to discern. So now bringing your hands in, feel yourself dropping through your hips, through your feet. Feel the push up coming up through your back and your shoulders. And finally your arms. Expanding, contracting remains principal rhythm. And the wild goose. Once more. And this time, dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Same rhythm, same movement downwards through feet and hips. Just a focus of your attention in just one side of your body. more on each side. And then two hands, two directions. One more like this, and we'll change to the four directions, which is basically just adding in one simple movement, which is going to be the turn from our hips and our waist. So after this one, start with the push up. Not only the push up, of course, but there's like a ball expanding. It pushes down into the ground through your hips and your feet as well. So as you extend out, you're really deepening that sense of the root, which is useful for when you're turning. One more round. Scooping the sea and looking at the sky. So I'm changing, grasping the tiger's ears. Switch sides. And then change. Hands back onto your shoulders for this movement. And then add in a turn in the center of your body so that the movement alternates. Notice where the elbow drops down. Just here, just slightly, sort of in line with the outer edge of your body. And your weight moves, so when you swing your left elbow over, you're moving into your left foot a little bit. That's a little bit exaggerated, but you get the idea. And from there, into the exercise bear play, just by bringing your hand out. That's all you need to do, is just to extend your arm a little bit, hand palm down. Nice smooth feeling of movement in your back. And then just do one more on each side. And we're going to change to hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. So bring your right hand down and then stay on that side of your body, turn out. Because you're really sinking into the leg here and winding the body up and then releasing. And then cow gazes at the moon more time. Turning your hands into the ball holding position and circling around. As though your body sort of contracts downwards, and then a little push from hips and feet. It's like your spine is gently growing upwards, and then contracting again. And then go back the other way. Good. And rest for a moment. And then rubbing your hands together again. Your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder. And your arm. Sides. Upper part of the chest. Belly. And your legs. And then stand. So I mentioned earlier that it's useful to think in terms of sinking down and to be aware of that feeling that we develop right at the very start of the class when we're sitting back in the chair and we're kind of flop back, a sense of allowing gravity to pull us down, and we then take that into a more upright position and then into the standing. And it's something that we want to hardwire into our system. If I stand here, just mostly on one leg, but I've got this down for a little bit of stability. I put my hands out here, yeah, I'm fine. But the further I push my hands out, the more likely I am to start to wobble around. So if my hand goes to here, I'm okay. But here, now suddenly, as I start to strain, or if I'm here, I'm looking at you, if I turn, I can do that. So all of these movements are movements that we want to do in moderation. We want to be careful about moving them, but all of them require that sort of stability that comes from the rooting down. And One thing that is very characteristic, I think, of all of these movements is that there is a counter movement. So, I'll show you from the side here. If I let my hips drop back, my shoulders drop down. In order for my shoulders to go up, I've got to push my feet down. So I've got to make that connection to the ground. And then I go up so far and I sink down again. And you'll notice because my shoulders are moving up and down, so are my hands and my fingers. And now I just curl my fingers underneath. And always there's a counter movement, and it always ends up going down into the ground. One more time. And then wild goose again. And part of the grounds. One more time. Now, 1 foot forwards. Transfer your weight. So, I may have said this more quite recently, but here, the first movement is really this, because I'll push down into the ground, and that would push me up. What changes it is that my intent is to move forwards. But once again, it means that I really feel the connection to the ground there, and I'm looking for the connection in the empty foot as I move into it. Now we can take that a stage further, and if I sit on my back foot, before I try and move my weight forwards, I just exert a little bit of pressure down through my front leg. Almost like the feeling when you're standing on sand and you're or if you're in the sea, you put your foot down, and then you just push it a little bit to find the firmer base underneath. So we actually get into the habit of establishing that connection before we move the weight in. It takes a while to develop that. It feels quite awkward at first. So don't do it too much at any one time, but it's something to come back to. then you can start to raise your toes. So you put your foot down, push in, and then let the weight move. And then when you're on the front foot, it's the heel comes up, down, push in. It's a very smooth movement, that pushing in. I suppose the kind of thing that you might use, again, thinking about gardening, if you're planting things, you kind of put them on, you push them down, but you do so very gently. Or you might even use your foot to sort of tamp around the edge of something that you just planted. But it's not a kind of stomping movement. And then stepping in. Remember, hand on the table or wall can be very useful, just so that you've got time and space to really feel the stages of the movement. A lot of this is about training ourselves to recognize what happens in the body quite naturally. How does your body balance? How does it adjust? And then on the other side. So that recognition of what is going on enables us to do two things. One, it enhances it, if that's what we choose to do. So there was nothing unnatural about Tai Chi. All these things that we talk about are actually natural functions in the body. But the second thing is that it allows a little bit of discernment, because we've often picked up bad habits. And so we can begin to distinguish between what we want to cultivate and what we want to discard. And then raising your toes and your heel. So this is where regular practice becomes useful, because those old habits don't just drift away without quite a lot of effort, really. We have to keep reminding ourselves of what it is we're wanting to do. Stepping in. Quite often, it's just a case of having something next to you that you can touch. Then sometimes you might need a bit more support, but actually, get this in the right position. That sort of sense of touching something is part of how we locate ourselves in our environment. Then, if you're comfortable with this, just taking a few steps either forwards or backwards. Change direction. Some of what we need to do to remain stable and upright is to do with orientating ourselves within our environment. I know sometimes you can be wobbly. Just touching something helps you to locate yourself within space. We see other animals do this. A cat or a dog will go around in circles, and they'll sort of get a physical sense of the space that we're in. It isn't necessarily a case of holding on to to something. Sometimes if you're walking along with somebody and you slip, you might put your hand out. You're not hanging on to them necessarily, you're just touching them. You're getting that sort of sense of what we sometimes refer to as proprioception. So the sense of touch is very much part of that. Now, 1 foot forwards and combining the transfer of the weight with the rotation, the movement I've taken to call in bird folds its wings. And then again, change into fisherman castanet. And pushing a wave. Good. And then shake out. Switch sides. And then changing. And change. Good. And good. Lovely. Back to your chair. So, once again, just sit in. Then your hips sink down, shoulders following. And again, that's almost like a melting away of the tightness and the stiffness, leaving behind this stronger feeling once again. And then embrace tiger, return to the mountain. And then this time, your hands come to rest. Sit quietly, just with this feeling of softness and strength. There's an interesting combination that we get in Tai Chi. And open your eyes. Lovely. Thank you very much again, everybody. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
have a good weekend if you're doing anything in particular, if you can do anything in particular.
Have a nice time at the seaside, Mike.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll do my best.
Yeah.
Always assuming I can get there and find somewhere reasonably quiet for some birds.
Oh, I hope you can.
Yeah.
Bye all.
Okay. Thanks very much, and everybody.
Bye.
Take care of yourselves.
Bye. Yes, you too.